I guess Palsteron here, and today let's talk about the PoE2 Ascendancies that just got released on the official website. So what happened is that GGG was thinking about whether they want to release the Ascendancies or not, and then somebody leaked it, apparently, and yeah, they just said, all right, might as well. So this is on the official website in its own post. Link down below in the description. And if you don't want to spoil yourself, just remember that you won't be able to change your Ascendancy during PoE2 early access, at least as of now. You can change nodes within your Ascendancy though, just to be clear. Now we talked a lot about this over on twitch.tv/Palsteron with my chat. I had a lot of interesting input over there. So we're going to kind of build that into here, and we're just going to start with Sword. Also, if you haven't seen this passive tree yet, I will also link it down below in the description. I will kind of talk about it a little bit here. So let's go through Stormweaver first. Exposure you inflict lowers the affected resistances by an additional 20%. This is a 2-pointer. Seems very straightforward, very decent. I assume that you can actually reduce enemy resistances below 0. You cannot penetrate it though, so do keep that in mind. If you want to stack minus res, you're probably not going to be able to work with pen whatsoever. Then we have 2 and 3, which is the Elemental Storm that we've already seen, and we now also know the second node. So Elemental Storm, we now know from the leaks, is a 5-second cooldown. And it's also up for 5 seconds. So it's like a 5-second duration storm. Trigger Elemental Storm on critical hit with spells. And then Elemental Storm has 150% more CDR. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, I guess, for the video. 150% more CDR, which sounds good. It gets it down to 2 seconds, but you need 2 Ascendancy points for this. And the most important thing to note is this only triggers on crit, but Elemental Storm itself cannot crit. So this is kind of weird because I don't really know what this is for then, because if you're scaling crit, you're also scaling crit damage, and then all your non-crits basically do no damage. So unless this is kind of to proc meta gems, which it might not even do well, because some skills actually only proc each meta gem once, even through its whole duration. We don't exactly know how that works. This is a little bit of a weird one. I'm not really sure if that's actually worth, but Stormweaver is thankfully pretty damn stacked. Heavy Snows seems pretty interesting. It makes it so your maximum chill is 35%, which matters a lot, going from 30 to 35%, but it's still only quote-unquote what a Temporal Chains does. It does have less magnitude, but it does make chill a little bit easier to stack. Do note that chill and freeze are separate as far as I know in PoE2. All damage from hits contributes to chill magnitude. My opinion is these are not really worth it under most circumstances, but they're not bad. It's just kind of weird that you get no damage, no raw defense. It's basically just, I don't know, kiting potential for like 2 Ascendancy points, right? You have to remember that, yeah, you can only take 4 of these Ascendancy points, right? After that, we have 6 and 7. So 5 and 6, 6 and 7, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are the 2 chill nodes, and then these are the 2 shock nodes we already knew about before. Targets can be affected by 2 shocks. Now, at this point, it is confirmed that this doesn't just make it easier to get to your shock, it also gives you 2 shocks. At least from the trailers, we have seen 2 separate shocks next to each other, and they start at 30% and apparently scale higher up to like 50 with shock effect. Knowing that, just this node alone is kind of a big deal, and if you're not a lightning build, this can be as well. Then we have the biggest payoff here for being Stormweaver, which is Arcane Surge, and then increased effect of Arcane Surge per 15 max mana. I'm actually very surprised this got through like this. So Arcane Surge is now confirmed. It is 10% more cast speed and 20% more mana regen. That is a big deal because recovery is definitely going to be a big issue with Archmage draining that much of your mana. Personally, here's my thought on the whole mana situation. I don't really like Mind Over Matter. I think your best bet is probably going to be to go ES and go Mana Stacker, but only for Archmage, maybe a few other things that are going to be on uniques, and this. Archmage is just strong enough on its own. I don't really know why you would ever go Mind Over Matter. If I think about how it's going to play out, it's just going to be weird. You're going to be absolutely drained. You might do some Mind Over Matter shenanigans where you actually kind of life tapping, but you're still spending some of your mana. I'm not really 100% sure how that's going to work, but there is maybe something there. But you never want to get locked out of your mana. One of the reasons why Mind Over Matter was so good in PoE1 was because you could split damage, right? Even across Energy Shield, mana, and life, and then have different recoups going off at the same time. That is not the case anymore. You either take damage from mana or damage from life. And once you take damage from life, that means you're so you can't cast. So yeah, I think the payoff is going to be Arcane Surge. It's going to be Archmage. I don't know if you're actually going to go Mind Over Matter. You're probably going to have to think about something else there. Or I'm cooked and there's going to be uniques aplenty and it's actually going to be easy to restore mana. As far as we know, there's no mana leech for spells, so take that as you want. 10% more cost speed. So if you have just 3,000 mana with this increased effect, you're getting a whole 30% more cost speed and 60% more mana regen, and so on. That is obviously incredible. So if you're a mana stacker, Stormweaver seems like a really good fit. And then at the end here, we have Heart of the Storm, 40% of LE damage taken recouped as energy shield. The main issue with this node is only that it's over 8 seconds. As far as we know, at least. So it's not like in PoE1 where it's in 4 seconds, it's over 8 seconds, so it's 5% per second. And is that good? It's decent. Like, it looks really good at first, but I'm not sure how to make it work. This could be one of the ways to give you some energy shield recovery. But if you think about just recharge and maybe kind of cheesing recharge in some kind of way, maybe just getting some avoidance so you don't get hit as much, sounds like a better idea than this. But I mean, we don't actually know. Like, maybe there's going to be some effect. Recoup is now in 4 seconds or something. And all of a sudden, this node becomes really, really competitive. Also, do note that we currently don't have Eldritch Battery on the passive tree. At least we're not going to have it. If that ever comes back and you can actually pay your mana cost with this, might be a little bit more interesting. Next up, we have the Chronomancer. It looks amazing. Go to the right side here. Let's see what it has. On the left side, we've already seen these. Most people have seen these from the trailers. At 4 and 3 is going to be the Temporal Rift, and the time freeze, which makes it so you can go back in time with Temporal Rift, and then the time freeze, make it freeze time, which is pretty good. Seems a little bit memey, but definitely interesting. And then on the other side, we already knew Time Snap, which was the 4-pointer here, right next to the time freeze. This one makes it so you reset your cooldowns. Pretty cool. And then now and again, skills have 33% chance to not consume a cooldown when used. Now, this would require you to actually look very closely to your cooldowns. If you're somebody like that, then this node is going to be good. Otherwise, it's just going to be an RNG fiesta where you're probably just going to be pressing like hectic and hope something happens. So keep that in mind. That is the node you have to take if you want to take the reset cooldown. It's here and here. I want to make you guys aware. If you want to take this full package, your Ascendancy points are gone, right? Just so you know. Yeah, that's about it. You can jump around. You have 3 extra buttons in PoE2. If you want to do that, here it is. After that, we have Quicksand Hourglass. So these are, I think, two 2-pointers, right? The 2-pointer on the left side is this right here. Every 12 seconds, gain 50% more cost before 4 seconds. On average, that's 16.66, right? It's decent for an Ascendancy point, but it's not reliable. On the other hand, you could also say you can line it up for bosses, but then again, most boss fights are going to take longer than 4 seconds. So, yeah, it's going to be a little bit weird. Like, it might be up whenever the boss is in a weird situation where you actually have to dodge and whatnot. I don't like these kind of pendulum effects, but yeah, it is what it is. 6 is actually really interesting. Probably one of the stronger nodes, if not the strongest node here. If I think about going time freeze, I would actually prefer to always have everything like just slowed around me for 20% than having a time freeze sometimes. But maybe that's not going to be how the game is actually going to play out. I'm not sure. I just really like the idea of this slow, this unconditional slow. And it's also presence, which presence is 70 radius. If you don't know what that is about the whole screen. And if something ever comes near you, you can stack this with chill, or you can stack this with temporal chains, blasphemy, whatever you want, right? Definitely an interesting one. For me, the most interesting one, probably. And then we have 2 recoup ones, which are quite interesting. 30% of damage taken recouped as life, which sounds quite interesting. It's actually probably one of the stronger nodes on this Ascendancy. 30% recoup, but once again, it's over 8 seconds. And the second, you have to realize that you're in kind of the region of mana, energy shield, right? So why are you life? And then most likely you take recoup effects instead occur over 4 seconds. So then you invest 2 points, and then this 30 is over 4 seconds, which I think if you take this node, you have to take a Rapid River. So one thing we don't know right now is how much support for recoup is there on the passive tree. We haven't seen really anything. Let's actually just look if I'm wrong on that. Have we seen too much? Yeah, we've seen 50% physical, which is very specific. We have, oh, never mind. This is actually just straight up damage taken as recoup, my bad. 6%? Is this also just 6%? Okay, so these are new. All right, cool. So you can have 12% recoup this life. So yeah, you can invest more into it, especially if there's like uniques that synergize with it. Honestly, these are probably the most promising nodes on Chronomancer for me personally. I think this is just going to be more of like a fun Ascendancy. But if anything comes out with this, these 3 nodes down here are pretty cracked when it comes to defenses. But you will notice that the competition is pretty rough. So that's why you will hear that quite a bit throughout. So, Titan, right? This is how it looks like. We're going to start on the left side with this 2-pointer. 50% more armor from equipped body armor. I have no idea where this got nerfed. It used to be double, and now it's just 50% more. I'm not sure if I'm missing something. Maybe it's like local and it can synergize with something. Not sure. I think it's garbage. You're probably not going to take it, but what do I know? 2-3. Next is this 2-pointer and this 3-pointer. This 4-pointer. So the 2-pointer is just the one we've already seen. Chance for slam skills. You use yourself to cause aftershocks. And then the second one down here after that is every second slam you use yourself is ancestrally boosted. And we know that ancestrally boosted now does 20% more damage in AoE, which also affects the aftershock apparently, because the aftershock scales off of that. So you can see on the right everything you need to look at. It looks okay. 4 points for 20% aftershock and 20% more damage. 20%. I would say it's okay. It's only at every second skill, so on average it's 10% and 10% AoE. I think it's all right. It's like something you take because you have to. But then the next points are a little bit bizarre, because the first node is absolutely garbage with carry a chest, which adds 20 inventory slots. Now, sure, I would like to have that bag, of course, but do I want to spend an ascendancy point for it? Hell no. That is just rough, man. That's a petty move putting it here, but there's a reason for it, because the second node is good enough for 2, and that's 50% increased effect of small passive skills. Now, for veterans of PoE 1, I think this effect will immediately like just ring the alarm bells, because that is insane with how many small passive skills you get. And it is apparently confirmed that it works with traveling skills. So whatever attribute you pick here, that's also going to work. We haven't obviously seen everything, but a few things I was thinking about. First up, there's no need for you that you have to go live, right? You could go ES, and we've already seen that some of these small ES nodes have 10 to 15% ES. I had found it. There it is. It is actually 10%, so they did actually reduce it. Maybe I'm cooked. Oh, they did change it. Maybe it's just 10%. Either way, you can stack an absolute crap ton of faster start of energy shield recharge, increased energy shield. A lot of these mods, I think maybe even stun threshold is going to be as small nodes. So that's going to be just incredible. But even if you just want to go the normal route, the increased damage you're getting, the attack speed you're getting, the pathing nodes you're getting, like the extra strength is going to help out a ton. All of that just makes this into a fantastic, fantastic point. And I'd be very surprised if not most Titans are going to take this. Now, it might not be as good early, but definitely end game. Also look out for stats like, I don't know, skill effect duration or AoE convenience stats that might be not readily available otherwise. Then we have the stun stuff, which we already had. We now know what Crushing Blows does exactly. Crushing Blows cause heavy stun on enemies that are primed for stun. Now, what that means is you cause a heavy stun whenever they're primed for stun. When they're primed for stun is different depending on what enemies you face. Is it normal? Is it magic? Is it rare? You can think about this kind of like as a call for stun. So if enemies are already 80% ready for their stun, instead they're immediately ready. Kind of like Cull. If you get them to 10%, they're actually dead, right? Kind of like that. And yeah, it's 40%. Like you're basically insta-stunning every white mob. Most magic mobs, most rare mobs, and then at bosses, you make it a lot easier. So Crushing Blow seems incredible. I don't know if this is going to be the only way to get it. If there's another easier way to get it, this devalues the Ascendancy quite a bit, but in general, Crushing Blow seems really strong. And then 40% more damage against heavy stun enemies. You're probably going to have quite a bit of investment in this, so I'm assuming you're going to absolutely wreck everything in your path. And then just to note, they did actually nerf the life note here. It's only 15% now, which is still okay. I wouldn't say it's like a must-have though, because I think that in endgame, most builds are going to go for these 2 points for the effect of small, and then either crushing plus strength, probably a lot of the time, or Earthbreaker Ancestral Empowerment. I don't know if Mysterious Lineage is actually that good. I know that life is premium, but I'm just not sure which of these 4 pointers you would actually want to cut into. Maybe you can cut Ancestral Empowerment, actually. I think that's a pretty good bet. You can just take the 20% chance for Aftershocks and then take the 15% more life instead. Then we have Warbringer, which is one of my absolute favorites right now. I absolutely love this Ascendancy. This is how it looks like. So we're going to look to the left side here. We see 1 and 2 next to each other. And these are potentially ridiculous. Break armor equal to 10% of hit damage dealt. We've seen so many skills that conditionally break armor. Armor break on Tuesdays, if you drink a beer on Wednesdays or some shit like that, right? But this one is literally just global. Every skill, break armor equal to 10% of hit damage dealt. This also works for your totems. It does not specify anything, so it does work for your totems. This is just ridiculous. Just this node on its own, even if the second node, which we'll talk about, is not that good. This node on its own lifts such a heavy weight, unless this is maybe like a stat you can easily get on weapons, or a stat that you can easily get on some kind of jewelry, right? Maybe. But from what we've seen so far, they made it a big deal. They made you use an extra skill to do that, which is usually clunky and only hits for so much. But here, all the damage comes in, and 10% of all of that is going to reduce or break armor, which sounds pretty damn broken, just like their armor, right? So that's number one. And then number two, you can break enemy armor to below 0. Now, I know what you're thinking, pal. Isn't that broken? And the answer is yes, but I can imagine that they made their own formula for this. There's no way you're actually going to get like 90% more damage from this. I think there's zero chance. They've probably built like a failsafe, and there's something that they just don't want to tell us about yet. If you look at this, you can actually hover over break enemy armor to below 0. I really want to know what happens if you click on this, what it's going to say. I don't think I've seen that yet. I really do wonder if it would say something like, is capped at 30% more damage or 40% more damage or something. Because yeah, otherwise, I mean, this will go completely like crazy. So you're going to enable stuff like on the passive to increase damage if enemy is fully armor broken and stuff like that. You will not want to do stuff that consumes their armor break though. And also remember that armor break does have a duration. So yeah, there is, I think, there is support for it. So there's armor break duration and whatnot. Break 25% increased armor. You're probably not going to need that. But maybe that's just straight up a moral multiplier if there's no barrier at all. I don't think so though. Break 30% of increased armor. Yeah, I don't think that's going to work. But I think there was one with increased armor break duration. That was not the one. Armor break duration, area damage, 100% increased armor break duration. This might just be completely busted against bosses, or it's just complete overkill. It's going to completely depend on this. But if anything, it's going to open up a new multiplier. Jade Heritage grants the skill Encase in Jade. And this, well, you gain a stack of Jade every second. And once you press the skill, now you're basically, you're posing for a while, right? I'm going to put it in the background right here. But basically, you become immune to any damage. Now, hit damage, to be fair. For duration, it absorbs all damage from hits. I'm not sure how that's actually going to work with damage taken. Does it count as damage taken? That's going to be an interesting one, I guess. A little bit more intricate. Up to a maximum based on the amount of Jade consumed, while in case you cannot move or perform actions. So we don't know exactly how this is going to work, but how I assume it's going to be is we're going to talk about totems. You're going to place down your totems. They're going to DPS. But if the boss targets you, last second, you click Jade, you're going to just stand there while your totems just hammer away. And once they kill your totems or they expire, you go out of Jade again. You keep placing them again in the right thing, and you wait for your next Jade up, and boom. Sounds pretty sick to me. I don't know if it's actually going to work out like that, but sounds pretty cool. As far as I know, you can't perform any actions, but I don't think that means that your totems can't perform any actions. Even though your totems are usually an extension of you, I don't think that's how it works. Now then, let's talk about the totem nodes. So Answered Call, if you don't know, it's this in the background right here, where the totem goes nuts and the spirit kind of like wanders around. We now know that this is a bug, basically just an AI bug that they already fixed, apparently. So the Ancestral Spirit is actually going to jump towards enemies, going to apparently also, like, I don't know if exactly taunt them, but it's going to catch projectiles and everything. So it's going to make it easier for your totems not to get hit, for you not to get hit. It's going to be very busy in front of you, right? You have to remember, which is going to be good for your survivability, especially while you're bossing. So you trigger this Ancestral Spirits when you summon a totem. And it says here, each of your totems will summon an Ancestral Spirit totem. Now forget that the keystone exists. For all intents and purposes, this keystone does not exist. Don't think about it. But we know that there's going to be, according to different sources, 2 to 3 nodes that give you +1 totem. Which means that we're going to have around 3 to 4 maximum totem on attack totems. 3 to 4. That's what we're going to have to play with. And that is a lot. We don't even know if you can get more on items. And there's definitely going to be some totem-related uniques as well, which might just be broken, right? for all we know. Like, that's been kind of the case in PoE for a lot of times. But let's assume we have 3 to 4. You're going to have that many spirits as well. They actually scale. We don't know if they scale with minion damage, but you got to remember that first up, they block a lot of damage, so that's really good defensive value. They might also have some kind of utility. Remember that you can support these with up to 5 supports. So you can put on stuff like Blind, or stuff that while it's up gives you like mana regen or life regen or anything like that. So I haven't really planned that out exactly, but if I find anything where this is even remotely useful, that's cool. And then on the damage part, I don't know if it's going to do much damage. I don't know how it scales. If it's just totem damage, it's probably going to be a little bit of a dud. This node in general seems pretty decent. Even if I'm a totem build, I can see myself maybe not even using it. There's a lot of other good nodes. Number 5 is the node you want to get behind, and this is a little bit of a bait. I feel like 20% of damage from hits is taken from your nearest totem's life before you. There is actually a node like this in PoE 1, and I do not like it at all. And this one is 5% of that, right? It's 5% of damage from hits taken from your nearest totem. Now, obviously, these masteries are pretty competitive in Path of Exile 1, and 20% is a lot more than 5. But it sometimes just one-shots the totems, because you don't know how much life the totems actually have relative to you. It's just really hard to say until we actually play. This might be really strong and absolute garbage, right? It might be just absolute the worst. Best case scenario, really good defensive note. Worst case scenario, just go for Jade Heritage instead, right? Renly's Training. Gain 40% base block chance from equipped shield instead of shield value. As far as we know, this does... I mean, it obviously doesn't scale with the percentage on the shield, because otherwise it would be way too easy to cap. But this used to be 50% and now it's 40%, so they did nerf it. And this is pretty good. We don't really know if there's any unique shields that just have very low block. Maybe there's like a unique shield that gives you a ton of stuff on block, but the catch is it has almost no block itself, so you have to get it. And then this node all of a sudden is like there to save the day. Okay, seems pretty damn good in the right situation. 7 is quite interesting. 35% less block chance, which is a big deal, but can block damage from all hits while the shield is not raised. So the reason it says while the shield is not raised, because otherwise you could technically, from the front, shield from AoE, which is not a good idea. Like, that would just be broken. But yeah, this just means that you can also block AoE, which, once again, we'll have to wait how much AoE there actually is. It is cool that you can do it against bosses. The question is, how often is it actually going to be valuable? You're investing 4 points here. This is going to be good regardless. This one could end up being absolutely insane. Could end up being, a little bit of a bonus. Warcaller's Bellow. Corpses in your presence explode when you war cry. Dealing 25% of their life is physical damage. Okay, we got a Corrupting Cry Ascendancy. Even with this here, ignore war cry cooldown recovery. So this is what kind of enables it. Otherwise, I think it's a little bit weird. I would have liked if it maybe was instead... I guess then it wouldn't work for the Corrupting Cry archetype, but I would have liked maybe War Cries are instant, or maybe make it a little bit faster, because that's like the most annoying part, but yeah, that's all it does. All right, then let's go to Deadeye. This is how it looks like, and then we go to the right side. So there is some frenzy beneficial stuff right here, and we can talk about Rain of Arrows, we can talk about Barrage, we can talk about all of that stuff all day. But just so you know, there's going to be a lot of frenzy-related stuff. I'm not going to play it, so I'm not too deep into it as of right now. Chance that if you would gain frenzy charges, you instead gain up to your maximum. Very high damage potential. Benefits from consuming frenzy charges from your skills have 50% chance to be doubled. Now, if you go to PoE2DB, if you want to play this archetype, I would definitely check out these skills. Now, if you look at some of these frenzy skills in terms of the damage multipliers that they gain, it is... quite insane just how strong this node just is, because most of the Ascendancies seem to be like, okay, an Ascendancy is 15 to 20% more damage, and this is just like, we're talking way higher. So just off of that alone, Deadeye already has a ton of potential, but it doesn't really end there. So Eagle Eyes, I don't like. You have no accuracy penalty at distance. I don't think it's worth it, but until we see how hard it is to hit enemies, I guess maybe. I really don't see it. It's just such a stacked Ascendancy. Then we have a decision on 4-5. On 4, you can either choose Point Blank or Far Shot. Point Blank, more damage in front of you. Far Shot, more damage away from you. From what I've seen with how fast enemies are nowadays, they're just going to run up to you. I don't think there's too much way to actually distance yourself. So most of the time, you're probably going to take Point Blank, but maybe there's some stuff for far shot as well. Maybe there's some return projectile that we haven't seen yet. Who knows? Endless munition skills fire an additional proj. What you have to remember, when this got revealed, a lot of people were like weird about it, but skill shotgun now. You have to remember that. If you go from 1 to 2 projectiles, that's double damage. So yeah, there's not that many ways to get extra projectiles. For example, lesser multiple projectiles you can only use once. Same with greater volley, right? And they both have heavy downsides. So just keep that in mind. Having this global on every single skill, especially if you use multiple skills, is kind of wild. You can apply additional mark. Hard to say. Like I said, a very competitive Ascendancy. Definitely look through the marks if you want to. Gathering Winds. We now know what Tailwind actually does. So let's look through it real quickly. Tailwind is a stacking buff, which grants 1% increased movement speed, 3% skill speed, which is attack and cost speed, and 15% increased evasion rating. Now, there's no more multipliers here. No more movement speed, no more attack speed. It's not action speed. But you also get 15% increased evasion rating. However, even if you just take the first node, you lose all Tailwind when hit. So this is going to be an interesting one. If you're like a character that has evasion and block, which is a pretty risky endeavor, you're already not bows, but still pretty risky. I would say this sounds really, really good. You have a ton of avoidance. You're not going to get hit much at all. I don't know. The way I see the game, you're still going to get hit and you're going to get pretty shit on. But there's stuff like rapid fire, right? Like the thing where you just like a machine gun. And apparently each one of those ticks actually works to give you a stack of Tailwind. So if that is true, then that's pretty cool. 30% less damage taken per Tailwind. Pretty good once again. And if you get hit, you lose all those stacks anyway. So then all the wind ward goes away. I would say, since you're probably going to need something defensive, there's a good chance you're just going to pick this up out of necessity. But between these two and then the Endless Munition plus either Point Blank or Far Shot, which is also a 2-pointer, or the Frenzy nodes, you'll have to decide to cut one of those. Or if you even want to incorporate some of the other nodes, I don't even know what you're going to do. This is a stacked Ascendancy and just very good in general. Seems pretty safe to play. Then we have Pathfinder, and it looks like this right here. And we don't know everything about this, but what we know so far is quite exciting. A lot of people have looked at this and they said Pathfinder is like the worst and whatnot. I'll just quickly semi-counter that point. They actually did nerf this node, which I have no idea why. 50% more flash charge gain. This used to be double. Now you have to understand this is I think only on life and mana flask, not on your charms, because they're not flasks. So I don't know if this is that good. Like, even double wasn't that good. So I'm not sure why they nerfed it, but they did. Because I was actually pretty hyped about the second node, but now I'm not so sure anymore, because it's going to be harder to sustain. The second node is Enduring Elixirs. Life flasks are not removed when unreserved life is filled. So basically, instead of your life flask stopping once you're full, you have perma regen, as long as you just keep pressing it every 5 or 6 seconds, right? Which we already know from PoE1. That's a good node in PoE1. People are taking Master Surgeon. It's good, even up to endgame. And guess what? The new one doesn't have 50% less life recovery. Now, new flasks do have less life recovery, so it kind of evens out. But we also do have, in general, less life than PoE1. So relatively, it should be round about the same. And you can also get quite a bit of life flask recovery on the new ones. So, in theory, this is just kind of nasty because the way they present PoE2 as this hard game where stuff doesn't necessarily one-shot you, but you have to react and you have to, like, press your flask all the time, be reactive, right? But with this, you just perma life flask and you just have like 1,500 regen on your 3k character. I don't know if it's actually going to play out like this, like it plays out in my head. I think that this is one of the strongest Ascendancy points hidden in a Ascendancy that's a little bit hard to use. So that might make it a little bit unattractive to some. But I think this is probably the most underrated, at least from what I've seen from other streamers and content creators and even people in chat, like people saying this is complete trash. I don't know, right? Like maybe it's like something where people haven't played this in PoE1. PoE1 is a very fast-paced game. You can like fill up immediately. It's no problem and people still play it because it's out of combat recovery. You do not need to hit anything. It's just like you can go through traps, you can go through dots. It literally doesn't matter. I just can't see how this is not really busted, but we'll have to see. Now that this is nerfed, maybe we need a little bit more support on the passive tree. But just so you know, there is support for this to get it to like 1,500 regen. Now, then we have number 3 and number 4, which are the poison nodes we already know. Now, I was actually pretty hyped about this, but the more I think about it, it's a little bit rough to make work. First up, The most damaging enemy you kill spreads to other enemies within 1.5 meters. There is one problem with this, which is that if you look at the spirit gems right here, this effect already exists on a Herald. Herald of Plague. It only takes 30 spirit to get this effect, and it's even more radius, and that's at level 8, so it probably goes up even more. And you hinder enemies, even if it stacks, right? Like, it's not like you need that much to clear packs. I feel like it's kind of a wasted point, unless I'm missing something. I wish there was more there. So, even though the second node is really good, double the number of poisons you can inflict on enemies, 35% less poison duration, you have to think about it this way. From the passive tree, we know you can get 2 additional poisons. You can get another one from the support gem. So you could get up to 8 as far as we know, maybe even more, because you double the poisons. But you also have less duration, so now you have to hit along a lot of times. So you could also say, why not just use a skill that hits less but harder? It would be the same outcome, right? Stuff like that. So I'm not 100% sure how good Overwhelming Toxicity actually is, but I have no doubt in my mind that somebody's going to find something good with it. So there's a good chance that there's going to be a build, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's just going to be very, very solid, right? Straight up. Then let's talk about P-Conk, or like the concoctions in general. You can choose up here on your 2-pointer between Poisonous Conk, Fulminating, Shattering, Explosive, and Bleeding. We don't know the numbers on this. At least I don't know the numbers of this. If you guys have seen this, hook me up on Discord or something. I don't even know. It says poison inflicted by the skill has more effect. Some rumors are that this is double effect, which I don't know the base damage. So I don't know how it scales. It does say dealing unarmed damage. As far as I know, this doesn't mean you have to be unarmed. It just means it doesn't take your weapon into consideration. So it has to have some flat damage on its own. How much is that going to be, right? Are you only going to go Poison Conk? You can maybe have a stat stick in your main hand, which doesn't have any damage, but like global stats or whatnot, right? So it could be really good. The rest, I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about it. Doesn't seem too interesting. It does apply cold exposure, lightning, fire. Seems a little bit out of left hand. Bleeding. I don't really know what to do with this. Really whack node. But then we have Traveler's Wisdom, which honestly, when I first looked at this, I thought, The more I think about it, the more I see other Ascendancies. A lot of the points that you take at the end that aren't like your best point are usually like 15 to 20% more damage, 15% reduced damage. They run about that. And Traveler's Wisdom fits in there and might even be better in some situations. If you think about PoE1 versus PoE2, in PoE1, the passive tree was maybe a little bit weaker because the notables in PoE2 are kind of great. Even though you don't have cluster jewels, they're kind of great. Meanwhile, the Ascendancy points got weaker. So trading off Ascendancy points for passive points seems kind of valid. Also, who knows what this small node here is? Maybe it is also +1 node. Although it does kind of look like a poison node, which is weird. We'll have to see. As for these, Running Assault, Relentless Pursuit, 30% less movement speed penalty while using skills while moving. I think there's a good way that you come into a situation where you have so much slow and so much movement speed yourself that you can actually just ignore anything and just move backwards while you kill everything while moving. There's definitely a chance that that could happen, and it would kind of feel like an auto bomber if you think about it. It just has a little bit, kind of like Cyclone also has less, and you can move. So in theory, pretty cute, but do you want to use that for an Ascendancy point? I'm not sure. Your speed is unaffected by slows. Same thing. A little bit situational to spend 2 Ascendancy points, but I can see some kind of auto bomber maybe using this. But then again, why would you play auto bomber on Pathfinder? Now, Blood Mage is a little bit of a weird one. It starts off with the doozy and then has some really good notes. So Life Remnants is, I'll just explain what I think about Life Remnants. It's kind of like a weird note because some people actually think this is an upside. So what Life Remnants does is you have these remnants that stay on the ground and you pick up those orbs and they give you life. Not just do they give you life, they can also overflow life, which basically means you can get up to double your maximum. So at first you think, oh my god, that sounds so good. So that's your first point, holy. But then you see skills gain a base life cost equal to base mana cost. The way I imagine this playing out is there is no shot you're going to overflow too much life because it's all going to go into spending your life. And if you think about how this works, it doesn't give you max life. It just gives you a buffer. And if that buffer is used up, you can't leech that back up. It's not leechable, right? It's not part of your life, technically. So what happens is you get this extra life up top here, but then you just spend it again and you're never getting anywhere to double up top. That is at least how I see this playing out. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't see it in any other way, personally. So with that said, it is kind of weird that there's also spell damage leech, which I guess it kind of synergizes, but it kind of doesn't. Because if you think about it, so you pick up these orbs, and let's say you are going to be over maximum, you can't leech that back. You only start leeching once you go back to your normal life. Obviously, this node on its own is a standalone good node, but what I'm trying to say is see this Ascendancy as more of like a 6-node Ascendancy. They're all really strong. You're going to see it in a second. This Ascendancy is good. I'm just saying I don't think this is really an upside. With that out of the way, I think spell leech is still going to be interesting. Like, there's not too much spell damage leech as life at all. So that could be a big thing. Your curses have infinite duration. Also 2-pointer right here. So once again, I want to make this clear. You have to take this point at the start, which is a very interesting decision. Curses have infinite duration. I have currently zero idea what to do with this. I'll be completely honest. Other than the obvious, making your curses infinite, which I don't think is all that good. Gain 10% of damage as extra fizz damage. Elemental damage also contributes to bleeding magnitude. Now, some people have said that might mean that it actually doesn't do that 100%. I'm not so sure about it because I don't know. Otherwise, they would just word it differently. They would probably say at a value of so-and-so percent. So I think it just means all your LE damage bleeds. Something I also didn't know is spells can now bleed, apparently. So there's going to be some weird stuff going around with some high damage effectiveness skills. Not 100% sure. We'll have to see. This is one that I'm not willing to go on my first character. Maybe if you're a blood mage, you might as well try it out while you're at it, because there's some other really good notes here. But yeah, definitely, like if you have something good for this, a lot of people will want to play it. Gore Spike. Increased crit damage bonus per 40 life. They did nerf this. It was 20 life, which was pretty broken. Now at 4k life, you only get 100 crit damage bonus, which before you got 200, which means it's obviously additive with all the other crit damage bonuses. It just depends on how premium this stat actually is. It's not technically a more multiplier, but it's still a lot of damage. And it's down here at the side. And then if you choose to take this, the second note is base critical hit chance for spells is 15%. Now, if you look through a lot of the skills right here, you will see pretty quickly that cold gems usually have the most base crit. They have around about 13%, a lot of them, 12, 13% when it comes to spells. So they only get a slight boost. It's probably not very good. Lightning, a little bit lower, around about 9%. I've seen 9, I've seen 10, but still pretty good. But if you look at fire skills, well, it actually says fire projectiles, okay. But if we look at actual fire skills, for example, Ember Fusilier, most of them have like 7%. So it more than doubles your crit. And that scales off of all the percentage. So is it going to be extremely good? Probably. But maybe there's another way to cheese flat crit somewhere else. We don't really know, but so far this seems like one of these stronger notes in this Ascendancy. Then we have number 7. If you know Brogenesis from PoE 1, that's basically what this is. 25% of life loss from hits is prevented, then that much life is lost over 4 seconds. So you basically stretch it out. So if you have some kind of good recovery, you can easily make up for that. Few things to note. There's no petrified blood in the game. Recoup is a lot worse. And you can't do any flask effect shenanigans. So if that's what you're thinking of when you're thinking that, if you're thinking broken, I don't think that's what you're going to get. If you're thinking very strong, then I think that's what you're going to get. I think it's a very, very strong defensive note, but I don't think it's going to be too abusable unless we're going to see other notes like this and we're going to see stuff. But I think they're going to stay away from this as far as they can for no weird 100% like just immune kind of build. In general, this is one of the better defensive notes we've seen in general. And then Crimson Power, gain energy shield from equipped body armor as extra maximum life. Is there going to be some kind of weird angle where you can go like hybrid? Maybe, but you have to realize this node is a second node. So while you can have grasping wounds and still get the double crit, do not forget that you have to take the first node. So that means you can't have both of these. One of them is gonna have to do. So these kind of compete with each other. And that's pretty rough. Also, if you go for energy shield base, you can't go for stuff like armor or evasion. So you're kind of locked into that as well. Now then we have Infernalist. This is how it looks like. And this has some really interesting nodes right here. So on the left side, you will see you have to take one node always. And then you can basically take all of them. All of these are hidden behind this one node. What is this one node? it is Altered Flesh. Cold damage thickness fire, lightning damage thickness fire, fizz damage thickness chaos. That means that if you're CI, 20% less fizz damage, straight up. Interesting thing you can do with that node is 25% of armor also applies to fire damage taken from hits. So that means that a part of that, which is 5% of that, also now applies to the cold and lightning damage. Pretty cool as well. And there might be way more along the line. So this could range from very strong to okay. If you're energy shield without CI, then you're just taking double damage because chaos damage deals double damage to energy shield now. It doesn't go through it anymore. That's a little bit of an iffy one. And you have to kind of be chaos risk cap, which I don't know how hard that is on a life build if you're just using normal life. Then you still have 75 res to mitigate that chaos damage, and it's probably still better than the 20% of fizz you would take. But then afterwards, you have some payoffs. Reserve 25% of life, reserve, reserve. All of these free nodes have that right there. And if you take all three, you're going to be on low life, which will mean that you are going to be eligible for Pain Attunement, which otherwise, as far as we know right now, you can't just reserve life somehow, like you could in PoE 1. So that seems one of the only ways. Maybe with gearing, it's going to be different, but that's a cool payoff already. However, obviously reserving all your life is a little bit nasty. What do you get for it? So at 4k life, if you reserved 75% of it, what you would get is 670 mana, 160 spirit, and 500 ES. Now you can obviously just take one or two of those and just sacrifice the life. I'm not 100% sure why you would do that and keep some of your life. Personally, not so sure. There is some upsides of being low life over, for example, CI, which is you keep your life technically, because for ailment threshold and stun threshold, your maximum life is what counts. So that should be a pretty big deal. But do note that poison damage can still go through energy shield, even if chaos damage can. Poison in particular still can, so maybe that's going to be a little bit weird. I'm not so sure, so you still have to have something there. But yeah, a lot of mana, quite a bit chunk of ES, and a lot of spirit. And then the 30% more crit damage from the passive tree from Pain Attunement. So in general, I think this is going to be one we're going to have to look out for gear. I think one or two good uniques could make this completely broken. So I would definitely look out for the Infernalist right here. And that's going to be the left side here. On the right side, we have some more frisky ones. First up, we have Demon Form, which apparently right now doesn't work correctly. It turns off your weapons, which they couldn't really fix, which is why they added a line to Demon Form. Now, this is apparently what Demon Form does. Look at this. So at level 7, 16% increased cast speed while in Demon Form. 10% increased spell damage per Demon Flame, which is basically the stack that you get every second, right? And while you're in this form. But you also get 1% of life per second lost. So for example, if it's up for 10 seconds, that's 10% life lost per second. 20 seconds, 20%. And once you turn it off, you can't turn it on again for 20 seconds. Do note though that you can put reduced CDR, which is 30% reduced CDR. And maybe this also scales with level, who knows, or you have some random CDR nodes on the tree. It also gives +4 to level of all spell skills while in Demon Form. This looks really impressive. Once again, your weapons are turned off while in Demon Form. I have no idea why you would ever use this. I'm gonna be completely honest. While this bug is still there, they said they can't fix it or something. That's why they added this +4 or something. I don't know why you would ever use this. Like, it's so bad. Like, have you seen weapons? It is wild. Maybe early, and then just respec it later. I have no clue, but so far, that is a big downer for me. I was really looking forward to this. The second node, just so you know for the future when this is going to get fixed, maximum 10 Demon Flame basically just means that this can't get out of control. So what this means, for example, is you could have a situation where you stop at 10 stacks, which means you never have to turn it off. You're permanent in Demon Form, and you only, quote-unquote, lose 10% life. You never go to those high things that you can't sustain. So all you need is 10% regen, and you're donezo, and you get your 100% increased spell damage, your whatever +2 levels. Is that going to be worth it? I'm not sure still, but I'm sure they're going to rebalance once they fix the bug. So that's it for 5 and 6 for the Demon Form. Then we have 7, 8, 9, which is all about this Pyromantic Pact. I'm going to put that in the background right now. It's like this orange mana bar that basically fills up, and when it's up, it goes down, and so on. They showed it in the trailer. All this means is basically your mana is replaced by this currency. You pay with this now. So basically your mana cost is not an issue anymore, but you take damage sometimes. That's basically how we can say that pretty in a short span. Do remember you can't use Archmage on this. That's a lot of damage. Even on builds that don't scale armor, that's still like 50-ish% more damage or whatever. Because you're going to have a little bit of mana, right? So that's kind of a big deal. Like just removing your mana is actually a big deal. Even Sigil of Power you can use, which is kind of like this thing where the more mana you spend, the more stages you get. It's more damage. It's on staves, right? Okay, whatever. So this is a downside. This node is a downside, let's be honest. Unless you have some weird stuff with taking damage. There's definitely a chance, like some cost 1 damage taking shenanigans, maybe on items. Who knows? Self-damage is pretty rare in this game from what I've seen so far. After that, we have 2 payoff nodes, right? While not on low Infernal Flame, which is below 35%, all damage from you and allies contributes to ignite chance and magnitude. So that means all your damage can ignite, right? Also for your minions. Maybe there's some weird things with like specters. I don't know. It seems a little bit risky, but then again, if there's some crazy specter, because it does also affect minions, which is a very interesting decision for them to make. I think this might just be broken, honestly, and you would just take it, right? So yeah, you'll see that. All the minion streamers are probably gonna have a lot to say about that. Seething Body, while on high Infernal Flame, which I don't know what this means. We do not know what this means, at least as of this point. It might mean 70 or higher. It might mean 80 or higher. You and your allies in your presence gain 20% of damage as fire damage. Once again, that seems kind of inconsistent. Although when you're a minion build, you can keep this up way easier because you can kind of manage your skills more. You don't have to spam. Okay. But even then, I don't know if that's worth the hassle. I'm not sure. Maybe this is like a premium node for minions. I'm not sure. For spellcasters, you're probably never going to take this anyways because you're, once again, losing Archmage. In general, this side I find very interesting. If low life is good, they kind of screwed up the demon form. This one I find kind of lackluster, maybe as a minion player. And then we have 2 more nodes left. The first one is very strong. Loyal Hellhound. This node is incredible. The best node on this Ascendancy, in my opinion. Hands down. You get to summon an Infernal Hound, and 20% of damage that you take is taken from the Hound before. And you can support it. So you can give it utility, like, for example, pin enemies on the ground on hit, or blind enemies on hit, or you can make him tankier with, like, meat, whatever the support is called. I'm not really a minion player. You know what I mean? There's so much, like, variety in here, and it's 20% less damage to take. I mean, it's just so good. It's just such a good node. You probably always take it if you're on this Ascendancy, unless you can't. And then Grinning Immolation also seems pretty decent. Become ignited when you deal a critical hit, taking 15% of your life. Okay, so when you deal a crit, you get punished for it. 30% more crit damage bonus. Now, one thing I see often is people equating this to 30% more damage. I'm not 100% sure if that's true, because we haven't seen that many sources of crit yet. We don't know how you're actually going to get there. Remember, in PoE 1, you had all your free power charges gone. Free Diamond Flask gone. And on the tree, like the nodes, I just want to remind you, I'm just going to show you this real quickly. The crit nodes, the crit percentage nodes on the tree are a joke compared to PoE 1. 16% for notable. 15% for notable. 10% for notable. That is what we're working with right now. If you pick up all of them, you probably get like 100%. Even if you have like a good base number of crit, you're not going to crit 100% of the time. At least I don't know how. But yeah, still seems like a good node. Just pointing that out. These 2 nodes, just good in general. I think this is still one of the best Ascendancies. And I think that once we see some uniques, this left side will be completely bonkers. Some people will be re-rolling. Demon form is kind of like a bust. Pyromantic Pact, I'm not really interested in this without minions, but I think we're going to find something here. Also, this is just a good 1-pointer as well. So you could just take 1, 1, 1, and then maybe something else. Now, I really like this one. This is Invoker. So Invoker has turned itself around quite a bit. That looks like this is the first Monk Ascendancy. First thing that has been revealed is the 1 and the 2 up here. Gain 1 spirit for every 6 ES. Gain 1 spirit for every 15 ES. Now, the downside is cannot gain spirit from equipment. Now, approximately, from what it looks like, you're going to get roundabout, depending on what you have in endgame, 100 to 200 spirit. Depending on what kind of base and what your choices are there. You go more ES leaning, more evasion leaning. Okay. Might even be more for all we know. Cannot gain spirit from equipment. That doesn't really matter for most builds for now, but there might be uniques that everybody runs that just has like plus 50 spirit or 30% increased spirit. And if that's the case, this is rough because you really want to get to the second node, right? But this node on its own, not bad. If the downside is nothing, I would probably spend 1 Ascendancy for 150 spirit. Yeah, that sounds pretty reasonable. But the second node here, oh boy. Evasion rating also grants physical damage reduction. 40% less evasion rating. Now, as of this recording, I have no idea what they mean by this. I'm assuming they don't mean you have as much physical damage reduction as you have evasion chance. Because that would mean you probably have like 50 plus physical damage reduction. Even with the 40% less evasion. Remember that if you are a life build, and there's a good chance you are a life, you don't have to be ES here, right? You can go evasion rating. Remember that you have so many points to spend for evasion if you want to. You don't have life nodes to spend on anymore. You can just go full ham. I mean, you could get to like, even on that 40% less, you could get to like 70% physical damage reduction. I just can't see that happening, right? Like there's no way that that's actually the case. So what I'm assuming is there's some kind of other formula and you're going to have like 20, 30% phys damage reduction. If that's the case, it's an okay node still, obviously. But if this actually works like it says, I mean, what the fuck? Then this might just be the strongest Ascendancy node. Like, I don't know what to say. Okay, but let's move away from that because we're going to see that on day one and somebody's going to post it. Maybe I'm even going to play it. Who knows? Faith is a choice. Meditate is a weird one because in the trailer, it took him 2.9 seconds to go from full ES to double ES. If you don't know what meditate does, is you basically start doing this. You go basically to overflow energy shield. So you can meditate up to double energy shield. That is not maximum though. If it gets depleted or chunked, you can't just get it back with like leech or something. No, you can only leech to your maximum, which is the half, right? The double that you got is just a shield that once it's used up, you can't get it again unless you meditate again. And you don't want to meditate again if you get interrupted, right? So you have to find your spots. While bossing, this node seems ridiculous. Like, you can do it when you go into the boss arena for the first time. You can get double HP, not get one shot. And then once you have him stunned, you can meditate again, right? Okay. That sounds busted to me. Like, if you need defensiveness, this actually, it seemed like a meme at first. Also, one thing I want to note is we don't actually know how it works right now. Channels to recharge energy shield, is that actually gonna work like it says it does? Because recharge energy shield right now is 12.5% per second. That's not a lot. That would take forever. But in the trailer, it only took 2.9 seconds. So did he just have an absurd amount of recharge, or does it work with cast speed? Because you can support it with stuff like faster casting and stuff like that. So do note that you can support it just like every skill. So I actually feel like meditate might be a thing. Just saying. I know it's kind of getting memed on. I'm going to go against the grain there. I am the Blizzard and I am the Thunder. So this was a 2-pointer, is meditate right here. These two nodes lead up to this node, which we're going to talk about next. 4 and 5. They both gain some damage at extra cold, damage at extra lightning. One gives on freezing, create shield ground. On shocking enemies, create shock ground. I don't think this is going to be good unless there's kind of gimmick with this. Some unique needs you to have shock ground or whatever. I don't know. They're just like pathing points. They're like, okay. Then we have Unbound Avatar. You need to apply like ailments. I think it was like 100 times or something. And then it goes full, and then you only get 40% more damage during. And then I guess you're applying more ailments during. It's kind of like Pewee 1 Warden, but worse. So imagine Pewee 1 Warden, right? You guys know this one? It's basically half as good as this one. Which, is that something you want? You also have to remember that the stacks, getting the stacks for this, getting this Unbound Fury is going to be way harder, because ailments don't just get created by critting anymore. You actually have to invest into it. I have a feeling this needs a buff. I don't think this is good. I don't think you ever press this. And you also have to take a mediocre pathing node before. So, I just don't think it's good. Also, this Ascendancy is stacked to begin with. So, meta skills gain 35% more energy. Wowzers. We are seeing some archetype here come together, which, well, we haven't seen all of these nodes, but we have seen this node. 35% chance for Furia skills to refund half of the energy spent. We don't know what this is, but it's also going to be something that has to do with energy. If you don't know, energy feeds your trigger skills. There's no cooldowns on your triggers, but yeah, you just stack up energy and at some point you release it. And yeah, that is going to be something we'll have to test out. This node might have a role in that. We're going to have to see. Sunder my enemies. Critical hits ignore non-negative enemy monster LE res. So what that means is enemies that you crit are considered to be on 0 unless they have less than 0. Then, for example, if they're on -12, they are considered -12. So that is, in theory, a upgrade over Inquisitor, right? And Inquisitor is already really good Ascendancy in Path of Exile 1. So that's cool. But two things. It's way harder to get crit in PoE 2 from what we've seen so far. Way harder. If you only get this on half of your hits, is it good? I don't know. Second, you might actually have a lot of ways to reduce enemy res with exposure, with curses, with pen. Pen is pretty easy to get nowadays, so that might also be a point against it. But from what I'm thinking is enemies are going to have a lot of res, and this means you have to take no pen on the tree. So not having to take anything in terms of penetration on any of those wheels will be a big upside. For example, a lot of builds are going to go here. So pen 6, pen 6, pen 15. Okay, cool. Right? Efficient. And they're going to get probably in total 40, 50 pen just to be prepared. If you guys don't know, pen can't go below 0 anymore. Minus res can. But either way, I think that this is going to be broken if you can get to 80, 90, 100%. And okay if you can get to like 50%. I still think this node is going to be amazing. And it is the first node here. The energy node is here on its own. And then the first node here, which I didn't know originally, is ignore any res. And then the second node is grants the skill elemental expression. That's how it looks like. It's kind of like if you're from PoE 1, a mixture of Wild Strike with this weird support that I even forgot about because, I don't know. It like, basically what it does is if you have a lot of strength, it will mostly proc the fire part. If you have a lot of dex, it will mostly proc the cold part. And then int lightning. Once again, it's pretty hard to crit. If you have 100% crit, this seems pretty good. I also don't even know if this extra can hit the same target, because in the trailer, a lot of the time it hits behind them, or at least it looks like it. So not really sure. This might just be a really, really good way to apply ailments, because do remember that this only triggers with melee crits, but it is a spell. So it's not just going to be, oh, you're just going to scale your melee build with this. No, it's going to be some weird cast on crit stuff. But once again, remember that you can support this because it's a skill. So you can support it with Culling Strike. You can support it with ailment supports and whatnot. Next up, oh boy, I need to prepare because I'm going to piss some people off here. Monk of Chayula. I think this is my least favorite Ascendancy out of all. In terms of power level, I'm not sure this could all fit together in endgame, but for right now, I'll just give you my take. So we're going to start at 7, 8, 9, which doesn't exist. These nodes do not exist. Unless I'm missing something here and the context for the game is just so bad, remove all spirit and then gain these like measly buffs seems crazy to me. I don't know what this is. In my opinion, Darkness Monk starts off with whatever this is. It has 6 Ascendancy nodes. So 2 of those you cannot take. So let's start off with that. All right. First up, let's talk about the most discussed one, which is Mana Leech is instant. I want to explain this. The reason why instant Mana Leech in PoE 1 is so goddamn good is because there's a maximum of leech. Any instant leech is really good because, I don't know, you can only leech 20% of life per second. There's no going over that unless you invest into it or you like Slayer, you have Valpact or whatever. There's no going over that. But if you have instant leech, that doesn't count towards that. And if you hit a lot, you can like leech back your whole HP immediately. Cool, right? In PoE 2, there is no cap. There is no cap. So you're not going over any cap. So all you're doing is whatever the duration is, you're putting that to 0. In PoE 1, the duration was 4 seconds. Going from 4 to 0 seconds. Big deal. In PoE 2, the duration is already only 1 second. You're leeching everything in 1 second. And sure, you could say leeching from 1 to 0, but there's also no cap. So it's like, I fail to see how this is broken, right? I know it's not a bad node. I'm not saying that. I just failed to see how it's OP. So don't take it the wrong way, but I don't get the hype so far. All right, let's see the second node. You cannot recharge energy shield. That's a pretty big downside. That is a pretty big downside. Mana Leech effects also recover energy shield. So most of the mana builds or mana yes builds that I would envision are going to have a lot more energy shield than mana. And the way this is phrased is not, it doesn't turn Mana Leech into energy shield, right? You still have your Mana Leech, but your Mana Leech informs your energy shield leech, which should mean that your leech is going to be a lot lower in energy shield because your mana pool is so much lower. Let's say your leech is 400, your mana leech. Your energy shield is also 400, but while you have like 2,000 mana, you will have like 10,000 yes. That is kind of like the issue. There's no percentage payoff there. So I don't know how good this is. Plus you lose recharge. I'm not sure how good this is. I think there is gonna be some crazy endgame thing with this, probably where a unique makes this OP. That's also maybe the case with this, but so far I just don't see it so far. Okay. Chayula's Gift, 10% max chaos res doubled. It's okay. We don't have any reference of this being OP. There's no Xabaqua, no way to abuse this yet. So far, it's like okay at best. This node is okay at best. It saves you a little bit of investment and hassle. Reality Rending is actually a pretty cool node. On average, this is 19.25% more damage. And what it does as well is it gives you big hits sometimes, which could be interesting for something like a poison build that just wants to find one good poison, and the high poison, hopefully, as it does appear, will override the other poisons. Maybe some other reason why you want to have a big hit, but the node is just decent in general. Now, here's the kicker. Waking Dream, Lucid Dreaming. You basically pick up these flames of Chayula that spawn nearby, apparently every 1.3 seconds. And you can like run around like a Draven in League of Exile, League of Legends, and pick it up and, I don't know, just like do whatever you want to do. I don't know how this is actually going to play and how nearby they will spawn on top of you. But in theory, it's interesting because it says red flames leech 7% of max life to you, which is not just an instant recovery to you, it leeches. So it has a timing, and you can scale it with extra leech modifiers on the tree. And if you go to the tree and you type in leech, you will see quite a bit of support here for mana leech and here for life leech. So depending on what you want to do, you can scale that 7% quite a bit. Plus, what you need to know before we look at these numbers is the second node gives you effect and duration is doubled. So that means instead of 5 seconds, this goes for up to 10 seconds, and this goes from 7 to 14. So now you can maybe get it from 14 to 21 or something. So there's a good chance you can just be walking around and be semi-immune. The same goes for mana, by the way. Also Mana Leech, which you can couple that with Mana Leech's instant if you want to. And you also get 7% of damage as chaos damage for 5 seconds, which is also very strong. So you can pick up a few of those and stack them, get like 40% more damage or whatever. A few things to note. The first one is the damage buff is additive with Reality Rending, so you have to kind of decide which one you take. This one gets a lot worse if you have Flames of Chayula, vice versa. So that's a downside. And other than that, just think about the playstyle of you like running around, not actually dealing damage. And don't forget that while sure you can move while you're casting, but you're going to be a lot slower. Is that going to be the kind of playstyle you want? Do you want to backtrack in maps to get a little bit of damage for 10 seconds? You kind of see what I mean? I'm not sure the playstyle is really conducive to this. And this seems like the best node on this tree. And I'm not even sure if I want to have it. That's why I don't like this Ascendancy. I'm not really sure about it. I'm sure in endgame, there's going to be a use case for this. Once again, I would put this on a very low tier if I had to make a tier list. I don't really get the hype right now. But let's round it out with a little bit of a doozy, Gemling Legionnaire. Now, this one has been revealed, and it's a weird one because it got a little bit nerfed. I know I made a video about this one earlier, but that one is already outdated, unfortunately, because, yeah, they weren't too happy, apparently. But we now know what Gemling Legionnaire does, which was the thing that I was looking forward to the most. Crystalline Potential. So we're going to start on the left side here. First node here, which you have to take, and then there's 2 nodes that you can take on top. The node that you have to take is 10% to quality of all skills. We've seen some skills in the leaks, what the quality does. In general, a lot of skills give you like 1% more damage per quality. So kind of like 10% more damage, but also not. So maybe like 6-7% more damage. Some are completely worthless, so it still depends. And it obviously works globally, so it works on all your skills. I'm not sure how good this is. Seems pretty weak, or at least on the weaker side. There might be something where maybe there's, I don't know, unique support that gives you 30% increased quality, and there's something they overlooked, like some kind of skill gem they overlooked, and it's so good with quality, and then this on top and everything could definitely happen, but we don't really know that right now. So a little bit mediocre. This used to be 12%, by the way. They nerfed that. Then we know this is +1 level of all skills, which sounds incredible, especially for early. It's the second point. For endgame, we don't know exactly what +1 skills mean. Does it mean 11% more damage, 10% more damage, or does it mean like 20% more damage? That's going to determine how good this is. It is global, so it works on everything. And as far as I know, it should also work on meta skills. Yeah, I mean, they are skills as well. So that's pretty cool. Decent 2 points. I don't know if you would ever go for them just out of, like, for no reason. But okay, the other payoff behind here, I'm a little bit confused by. Advanced Thaumaturgy, 30% less cost of skills. Skill gems have 30% more attribute requirement. To my understanding, this only affects life and mana costs. I don't know if there's other stuff that I don't know about. Maybe some rage costs, like for example, Chainbreaker in PoE 1 or something. But it even has a downside. I wouldn't even take this note if it didn't have a downside. I don't think Spirit is a cost. We've seen Reservation still being a name, right? Like a thing that you call it. We don't think that energy is going to be a cost. It's going to be more just something that gets depleted. So I don't know what this is. I'm probably just missing something, or we're not really filled in on what this is used for, but otherwise this might be the worst Ascendancy node out of all of them. Grants 3 additional skill slots, so now we're on the right side. So that was the left side. This is the first node here, and after that you have 2 payoff points. This is the number 4. Grants 3 additional skill slots. Like I said already, if you're doing something like a trigger setup where you just have like 4 different triggers, you're just scaling different ailments, you're proccing other skills, this might be quite interesting. It also does feed into one of the next ones because it does give you a set of new support gems, which is very, very strong. So with this, you can get like up to 18 skills or something. It's pretty wild. The next one is insane, and it is you can use 2 copies of the same support gem in different skills. I actually called this on stream. I did. I literally said that's what it looks like because it just made so much sense. You have to fill so many support gems that at some point you're just gonna have trash. So this just makes sense. My first thing was you can actually use 2 Unleash supports. So that's this thing where you basically load up the charges and then you cast 3 spells at once, but it has to reload again. What if you had 2 Unleash setups? You go into the pack, you proc the first one, you proc the second one, you probably can move on, right? You deal an absolute crap ton of damage. And don't forget, you have 2 setups, but you can use the same damage supports on both, also because of this node, right? So you can maybe, I don't know, mix and match 2 skills that fit well together thematically, some kind of synergy. I'm not 100% sure, but it sounds pretty cool. You can have 2 CDR support gems. You can have 2 of each damage support. Maybe 2 skills that have chance to poison, because it seems kind of hard to get base chance to poison on stuff in general. All the plus to skill levels. Maybe there's some weird stuff with Infernal Legion minion instability, just like sacrificing your own minions over and over again might be cool. Life tap, so you could make your mana a lot easier. More or less duration. Curse supports, maybe 2 different setups. Impending Doom, I'm going to do some research about that. Inspiration, which is just less cost, who knows. Second Wind, which is the one that gives you an extra cooldown use, but you have less cooldown recovery. This way you could preload 2 skills with 2 cooldowns. Depending on what that is, maybe Hammer of the Gods plus something else, maybe some other bonk. Vitality just gives you a little bit extra regen, or you could have 2 setups that gives you Wither, which might make that easier. Those are the ones that I came up with, but I'm sure there's many, many more. You can look through all the support gems yourself if you want to. I think this is the most likely one that's going to make Gemling Legionnaire playable. I think without knowing the whole game, though, it's kind of impossible to know what to do with this. Then we have Thaumaturgical Infusion, which got nerfed. It used to be per 3 support gems, and now it's per 4. You get +1 maximum res per 4 supports of a certain color. On average, on a full setup, it's going to be around about 6 max res of all of them, right? So like you're going to proc this 18 times. So 6, 6, 6, for example. If you can kind of have some damage conversion and only invest into mostly 1, maybe you can get like full max res on one of them and then convert. but then it's going to make it awkward because now you have to use either all blue gems or green gems or, yeah, I don't know. This got nerfed quite significantly, and it's going to have a big impact. This was the strongest node on Gemling Legionnaire, and now it's kind of like a little bit of an afterthought. We'll have to see. Because max res, scaling max res is only really good if you can get like high max res. Adaptive capability, this one we also already saw. This one is on the bottom right here, number 7. Attribute requirements of gems can be satisfied by your highest attribute. I don't know if that's worth an ascendancy right now. I'm not sure how hard it is to do, but with this many support gems, maybe it's just necessary, which would make it kind of awkward because then you have to take this point instead of some of the other good ones. And then the 8th one we did not know. This is the one up top here behind. Quite interesting. Inherent bonus from intelligence, strength, and dexterity are doubled. So intelligence is 2 mana per intelligence, strength is 2 life per strength, and dexterity is 5 accuracy per dex. Now, is this node good? If there is something like a stat stacker, yes. Think about it. If you can get to 1,000 plus strength, this straight up gives you 2,000 life, right? That's a lot. So that's a good node, but is that going to make a difference? I'm not sure. Like, you need other synergies, of course, and you need to get to 1,000 first. We don't get that much from the tree anymore. Remember that every pathing node is now just 5 more. Each and every one of those, I don't know, is not going to be that exciting. You may be going to get to 250 on your own, maybe to 300, 400 with gear, but then unless you have something to cheese like Astramentis or just like all attribute gear in general in PoE1, I'm not sure if you're even going to hit 1,000. So this is all kind of speculation. In general, this seems like the kind of ascendancy you use once you know the game and not something you should be touching ever if you're just starting out the game. But who am I to tell you? Unless you're very experienced, of course. Then let's go over Witchhunter, which is, I call him Mid-Hunter, which is kind of what he is. It's a little bit weird with some potential upsides. First up, the weirdest thing is this is supposed to be the boss killer archetype. At least that's kind of like the flavor it's choosing. And none of the damage nodes are good against bosses. They're all good for clear, like really good for clear. They all suck for bosses. Okay, let's go over this. The first node is 20 passive skill points become weapon set skill points. So you can now, on weapon swap, change 40 of your points instead of 20 with this node. I don't think it's that good. Maybe there's some shenanigans with it. I'm a little bit cynical about this. I don't think it's really going to be worth it in Ascendancy. Then 2, 3, we have right here, Culling Strike into Decimating Strike. Both of these suck for bossing. Culling Strike sucks because they scaled it down up to only 5% against uniques, 10% against rares, 20% against magic, 30% against normal. It's good for clear, but it's like, it's not a big deal. It's a decent node at best. Decimating Strike also, this one's good for clear. Like actually good for clear because it's even really good against rares. It's just super bad against bosses. So this node deals between 5 and 30% of life the first time you hit an enemy. That is on average 17.5% more damage. Cool stuff. But it's in the worst phase. So think about this. You go into a boss fight. The first phase is like by far the easiest. It's like when the boss is slow, he isn't enraged, he's just chilling, feeling you out. That's the phase. Do you need to make that faster? In endgame, when you're, okay, you're super strong, you kill the boss in 10 seconds, if that's going to be a thing in PoE2, which might be. Okay, you shave up a second or something. But in terms of difficulty, it's exactly the same. Even if you hit for 30%, okay, now he's phased. Would you have done that first phase anyways? Of course you would have. If you can't do the first phase, there's no way you can do the second and the third. You're gone, right? So Decimating Strike is terrible against bosses. I have no idea what this node is even doing on this boss hunting tree. This is something I would expect from something else. I have no idea what Decimating Strike does. That's about it. That's just my rant over. Concentration is a weird one. Now let's talk about concentration. So the way this works is concentration is this debuff that gives enemies up to 50% less CDR. And it starts at 0 CDR and it ramps up to 50 when you hit the enemy for up to 40% of their max life. So in theory, it's on 100% life, it goes up to 60, and that's where it starts to have 50% less CDR for the rest of the fight. But also not, because a lot of them have phases. And see, down here it says it scales down. Enemies regain concentration if they haven't lost concentration the past 5 seconds. So after 5 seconds of them not taking damage, they get it back. And guess what bosses do? They have phases. That's what GG loves to do. It's not going to be up that much. First point. Second point, by the way, the second one gives you a decent damage buff. That's all it does, 4 or 5. Second point, is CDR actually something that is that great against bosses? I'll name you an example. Can you think of a video game where there's a boss that has really annoying, super fast auto attacks where you just like, you're running around and you're just waiting for him to stop and do his long-winded cooldown attack? Yes, I've had that before a lot of times. So you wait, then he does his long-winded cooldown attack, and then you can finally DPS. That might happen in PoE 2 as well. And guess what? Those auto attacks are going to happen way more because now he has more cool... Like, he's never going to do his cooldown attack. So I don't even know if this is necessarily an upside against most enemies. We'll have to see. Maybe they made it that way, but we don't know. It's going to be phases, so this is going to be... On the flip side, though, especially when it comes to like killing pinnacle bosses and stuff like that, if you want to be world first or if you want to like be as fast as possible, there's a chance this is going to brick some of those bosses straight up. That's also the other coin of the medal, where some bosses might just like weirdly bug out or just do nothing for a while, and you can just do whatever the hell you want. So I guess that's the flip side. So I think this is going to be a very situational one, but definitely one of the cooler Ascendancies. I'll give them that. All right, then you can barely see it down here. Obsessive Rituals, Ceremonial Ablution. I've never heard that word before, but that's fine. Grant Skill Sorcery Reward. What does Sorcery Reward do, you ask? 1 second. BRB. 50% less armor and evasion rating. That is something you cannot remove. It's just halved. Both your armor and evasion rating. 50% increased effect of Sorcery Reward, and then Sorcery Reward recovers 50% faster. Sorcery Reward takes like 8-ish seconds to come back. It's basically like this bubble. It's kind of like in PoE 1, this like LE bubble that protects you from damage, which was here at Bastion of Elements, if you know that one. But the way it scales is it gives you a buffer equal to 30% of your evasion and armor. Let me actually see if you have the math somewhere here. Just like really, really quick math. Should have it somewhere here. Yeah, we literally just... literally this is left, I guess. So you lose half of your armor and evasion. Let's say your evasion and armor together is 40,000. You lose half of it. You're still left with 20,000. Now you get 9,000 shield because it's 30% of this. But you invested 2 Ascendancy points and you lost half of your armor and evasion, which also has other things that it does, right? Physical damage reduction and chance to avoid hits. Is that worth it? I think on a lot of life-based builds, yes. That's actually quite a bit. If you think about how much these life-based builds are going to have on the bottom of the tree, probably 3 to 4k life, that's kind of wild. Getting a 9k that's really fast to recharge. Do remember that you can support this with CDR. So you can have 30% CDR on this. So it can be back up in probably like 5-ish seconds. Maybe even other supports that I don't think about right now. But I think out of all the nodes, this is probably the most broken one. This is potentially like really, really good. Especially since it seems like elemental defenses are kind of premium. There's not that much max res running around. There's no more endurance charges that give you less elemental damage taken or something. So big. And then Zealous Inquisition at the end. It's explodey, 10%, 20% against stuff like Breach. I think Delirium Mirrors has quite a bit of demons as well. It's going to be up a lot of the time. You have to realize, though, that we haven't seen that much pack size yet. So explodey is good. It's 100% explodey. The AoE also looked quite fine, but it's going to completely depend on that. So I will say that most mercenaries are going to take this just because it's so much fun. It is just funny, right? Like, look at this. There's 3 nodes that are really good for clear that just do nothing for on the boss hunter class, right? Zealous Inquisition, Pitiless Killer, Judge, Jury, and Executioner, all really good for clear, and doo-doo for bosses. It's kind of funny. Also, do remember that this might be broken against some bosses with ads. I don't exactly know how that's going to work if they thought about that, because 100% is a lot. But yeah, that's about all for the round down. For me personally, my favorites are, in terms of power level, Stormweaver, really strong. Warbringer, really strong. I think Titan is also strong, but I like Warbringer just a little bit more because these armor break nodes are so wild. I absolutely love Invoker. I don't know if I'm going to league start it. I don't know if it's a league started one, but ooh, it seems juicy. Especially Protect Me from Harm might just be broken beyond belief. Other than that, I definitely want to try out Pathfinder because I think this Life Flask is good, but maybe I'm just hallucinating and it's going to be way too hard to get going. We also don't know what Poisonous Concoction is going to do, so I'm going to look out for that. And that's about it. We've been yapping for way too long. Whenever you see this video, I might be up on Twitch right now discussing what I'm going to play next. Otherwise, just wait for the YouTube video. I'm probably going to make one. I mean, most likely going to make one kind of like going over it. With that said, there's not going to be an actual build that I can release, because if my build sucks, I'm just going to reroll. I want to have a good time in the first few days. There's a good chance it's going to be something with totems, though. Who would have thought? But we'll see about that. If you made it so far, I don't know what the hell you're doing, but yeah, thanks for watching. And since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.